This is my first movie review in a series that will hopefully be consistently uploaded over the next couple months. I wanted to try my hand at reviewing movies, so I decided to review the movies that I've been assigned to watch in a film class because I have to write about them anyways. The first movie I watched was Creed, directed by Ryan Coogler. Creed is the next step in the Rocky franchise, which I'm sure everyone has at least heard of. I, unfortunately, have only seen the first Rocky, so I'm sure that affects my view of this movie. Creed is a movie about Adonis Creed, the son of Rocky's famous rival, as he becomes a boxer and is trained by a retired Rocky Balboa. Although it's certainly formulaic, there's a lot to like about Creed. It has a likable cast of characters, and the actors that portray them do a good job. Adonis Creed, played by Michael B. Jordan, was probably the character I enjoyed watching most, which is a good thing since he's the main character. Like the first Rocky movie, and I'm assuming all the others, Creed is a build-up to one big fight that serves as the climax of the movie. Most of Creed's runtime is spent on Don's training and developing his love interest. I found the love interest to be one of the weaker aspects of the film, but it wasn't unbearable, and I don't necessarily think the film would be better without it. A lot of time is spent developing their relationship, but a lot of it just felt unimportant. Things would happen, they would get into fights, and then it would be resolved without much changing by the end. I think the romance serves its purpose, which was to make the audience care more about Don and give him more to lose in the big fight. But I felt much more engaged with Don and Rocky's relationship. Don convinces Rocky to train him because of the relationship they both had with his father, and the way they grew together ended up being one of the most interesting aspects of the movie for me. At first, Rocky has no interest in training Don, but eventually he decides to help. Rocky is his trainer, but also sort of a father figure to him, and it's clear that Rocky needs Don as much as Don needs him. There are events during the story that change their relationship in ways that allow them both to grow, like when Rocky is diagnosed with cancer and has to be convinced to get treatment. Although while I'm on the subject of Rocky getting cancer, I do want to bring up one thing that happened in the movie that was a bit ridiculous. Rocky originally doesn't want anyone to know he has cancer, so he asks the doctor not to tell anyone about his diagnosis. And then the next time we see Rocky, he leaves all of the pamphlets he got on treating his cancer in his jacket pocket, which he hangs in the gym locker room, where everyone can clearly see it. As expected, Don finds it and then learns that Rocky has cancer. It was a ridiculous sequence of events that had no real purpose. I know Rocky isn't a genius, but if he had the foresight to ask his doctor not to tell anyone, I really think he would be able to understand that leaving evidence of his cancer in a place where everyone at the gym is going to end up going to isn't the best idea. It only served as a way to emphasize that Rocky didn't want treatment and to add a little distrust between the two characters, and it really distracted me. But other than this one moment, I think the relationship of Don and Rocky was very well done, and it succeeded in making me care about what happens to them. There's a not-so-subtle message about passing the torch and the next generation, with Rocky often not understanding technology and Don using it to help him train. Since this is a movie with a clear goal to try and modernize the Rocky series so they can keep making movies, the passing of the torch was obviously going to play a large role in it, and I think the movie succeeded at being more than just a setup for a continuation of the franchise. Don isn't just becoming the new Rocky, he's struggling with who he wants to be and whether or not he cares about his father's legacy. He gets told by everyone that he doesn't belong in the ring and that he didn't earn his spot there because he comes from a privileged background. Many boxers fight because it's the only way they can make a living, but Don left behind a well-paying job and a big house to be a boxer because he thought that was who he was supposed to be. This was a convincing motivation for me because I wanted to see him prove everyone else wrong. A big part of this theme is also reflected in the struggle Don goes through with his family name. For most of the movie, he doesn't use Creed as his last name because he wants to make it on his own and he doesn't always want to be compared to his father. Once word gets out that he's a Creed, he has to decide whether or not to use it to his advantage. He gets offered a fight against a big-name boxer, but only if he goes by Creed. I like this dynamic, although I think they could have done more with it. In every instance where he has to decide whether to use his father's name, he kinda just ends up being convinced that it's fine. Maybe the struggle continues for him and will be explored more in the next movie, I don't know. The last thing I want to cover is the final fight, because it's arguably the most important part of the movie, and if they didn't nail it, Creed would probably have fallen flat. I'm glad it ended up being really well done. The entrances of both players were incredible and perfectly exemplified the dynamics of the two fighters. With Don, it's a little bit more understated, with Rocky giving advice to him about being nervous before being drowned out by the roaring crowd and music playing in the background. And then when Ricky Conlan, Don's opponent, enters, he shows absolutely no hesitation and has a flashy walkout with fire breathing and fog, without any signs of stress or worry. It immediately makes it clear who has the upper hand, and makes it clear that even after all his training, this fight will be an uphill battle for Don. And honestly, the entrances are just so much fun to watch and really added to my enjoyment. The final fight itself was well done, and it was a fitting conclusion to the movie. Although I know very little about boxing, I'm pretty confident in saying that no one can take as many hits as the people in this film do, but I don't think the appeal of this movie is having a perfect recreation of what boxing is like. So aside from that, the fight was excellent. There aren't any weird cuts that make it hard to tell what's happening like you find in a lot of fight scenes, so you can clearly see every punch that gets thrown, and the use of slow-mo really gives the hard hits serious impact. The longer the fight goes, the more the attitudes of the fighters change. Conlan goes from being absolutely sure of his victory to slowly getting more scared and desperate. Creed gets more confident as the fight goes on, although he takes a serious beating. When the fight ends, neither player has been knocked out, although both of them have gotten seriously close, and Conlan wins by points. One thing I really appreciated from both the first Rocky and this movie is how winning the fight isn't always necessary for it to be a victory. Creed may have lost to Conlan, but he showed the world that he deserved to be there and he deserved to be fighting. Conlan even shows him respect at the end and says he's the future of the division. It's obviously not a new thing in the Rocky movies, but I'm glad they were able to carry over that aspect from the originals. That's all I have to say about Creed. It's a movie I think I could recommend to anyone. It's one of those rare blockbuster movies that actually has a bit of personality to it, and it proves that a movie can be both popular and actually good. I'm looking forward to watching Creed 2, and maybe going back and finishing the Rocky movies one day. I hope you enjoyed this review. I don't know how often they're going to come out, but I will hopefully be releasing a few movie reviews in the next couple of months. Look forward to my next review, and I will see you soon.